So welcome, everyone. Let's bow in for class. And tonight we're discussing chapters 20 and 21 of the Profound Treasury of the Ocean of Dharma. The first chapter is called Cultivating Virtue, Becoming a Dharmic Person. And I'd like to emphasize at the outset that we're not trying to repress or somehow eradicate all of our neurotic tendencies. It's not possible to do that. We've all got plenty of neurosis that comes out as aggression, passion, and ignorance. Those are the three poisons that we direct towards other people. And the theme here is that we are coming awake, that we're beginning to be aware of what is going on in our minds rather than constantly dreaming, so that when we realize that we've been engaged in some project of aggression or envy or pride, that we can wake up from that. We can see that we were doing it. And in seeing it, we come back to what? To this awareness right here in the present moment. It's just like in the morning when you wake up and you realize that you were having a dream, and that dream may have been fraught with all kinds of anxieties and anger and lust and whatever it might be. But when you realize that you were having this dream, well, you're not anymore. It's just the same. The act of meditation is the process of coming back to awareness, the awareness that is always with us. It's always there waiting to be acknowledged. And we come back from these dreams. This is the fundamental nature of the Hinayana path, becoming a Dharmic person. And then you begin to have options. When you begin to realize that you can come back from these dreams, wake up from these dreams, and behave in a different manner altogether. So we start in this chapter. He says, to attain enlightenment, you have to pay attention to the utmost details of how you are conducting yourself. This is just, I hope, what I was talking about. Until one does that, we're kind of sleepwalking through our lives a lot of the time. The Hinayana is the yana of details. Every aspect of your being is understood and trained to be worthy to hear the teachings of the Mahayana and the Vajrayana. The teachings work together. And the training doesn't mean that you become some kind of paragon of virtue, like a Mr. or Mrs. Goody Two-Shoes. It means that you become awake, to all of your neurosis, one's neurosis, as well as one's wisdom. And the wisdom really is the ability to be present, clear, and seeing. And he says at this level, the Dharma boils down to your sitting practice. The reason for that is that when we first come to the path, and for a long time after, we are so caught up in our habitual dreams. They are lying there in our unconscious, if you will. They call it the storehouse consciousness in Buddhism, and Freud called it the unconscious. And they're constantly being triggered by one thing or another. And they come to life, and you act out a passion towards some other person or some situation or whatever it may be. And until we start to become aware of that, there's no alternative. We're just constantly going into dream and acting out our dreams. And so at this level, the primary technique that we use to begin to wake up is sitting practice. Because it's when we sit, we're trying to give ourselves the opportunity to stop dreaming. Not only to stop dreaming, but even to force ourselves to wake up, Because here you sit and you're not moving, you're sitting on your chair and you go off into a dream and then you realize that you're dreaming and you come back. Well, when you're walking down the street, it's so easy to just chain link these dreams. But on the cushion, you have more opportunity to come back. And in fact, what happens on the cushion or on your chair, wherever you're meditating, when you're watching your breath, when you're coming back to awareness, however we're meditating, is that you experience boredom. Boredom is essential. Boredom is the great slayer of ego and its dreams. When we experience boredom, the first experience we have is of what my teacher called hot boredom. Hot boredom is, I don't want to be here. What can I think about? Let me think about some fantasy of pleasure, maybe cooking or sex or whatever it might be, skiing. I'm going to go skiing. And you conjure up this thing to entertain yourself to get rid of that boredom. That's hot boredom because it's very unpleasant. Eventually, as you sit longer, and many of you have already experienced this, is that boredom cools and it becomes cool boredom, and you begin to feel that you can sit with it and that you can let it just be what it is. And this is a kind of dignity in a way, and it's of strength that you don't have to react to that boredom to escape it, that you can sit there and just be whoever and what you are at this moment. And that is where Hinayana practice begins to conquer dreaming, just begins. Because when we do that, we can see the dreams as they arise and as they pass away, and we can come back to awareness much more easily. So sitting practice is really the fail-safe. It's, if you say, some people I've heard this so many times, oh, my running is my meditation, or my art is my meditation, or my music is my meditation. And what I hear is a person is doing something that is entertaining in one way or another, and they're trying to call it meditation. The reason sitting is so important is it's fail-safe for that. There is nothing entertaining about sitting in itself, unless you bring it in the form of some kind of fantasy. So sitting is the absolute gold standard. It makes you sane. And that's why he's saying here, the Dharma becomes a part of you. You behave decently when you begin to actually start sitting practice. He says it tames you so that your ego neurosis and individual attachment don't play a big part in your life. Certainly not when you're sitting. You're becoming a decent person like the Buddha. And decent doesn't mean necessarily that you've gotten rid of all your neuroses. Maybe you're an angry person, maybe you're a lustful person, who knows what, a jealous person, an insecure person. But you do start to become aware of it. Just like in the morning when you wake up and you realize you were dreaming, you had a nightmare, you had a pleasant dream, whatever it may be, and suddenly you're not doing it anymore. You're not in that dream anymore. And it's the same when you sit. Now he talks about the 7 characteristics of a Dharmic person. And he says, being genuine is fundamental. And what genuine means is that you're not dreaming, that you're not, having some idea of what I should be, which is another dream. Oh, I should be this kind of person. I should be that kind of person. I shouldn't be this other person. And that's another dream. And you come back from those into being just who you are. That's genuineness. And there are 7 characteristics of a Dharmic person. The first one is he sort of brackets them with 2 others. The first being to create a proper physical environment for meditation practice so that you can organize your life, and include awakening, meditation practice, shamatha discipline. Shamatha means coming back from dreams. That's exactly what shamatha is. Coming back from dreams into something in the present moment. It might be your breath. It could be a mantra. It could be just coming back to some object that's sitting in front of you. But when you do that, you're coming back from dreams. And shamatha has three main virtues. The first is that you get a rest, because dreaming is full of anxiety. Think about it. There you go. Dream about it. When you have your dreams, they're full of, I wish things were different. And how can I make them different? And I'm going on a journey towards something different. They're full of wishing things were otherwise, anxiousness, and strain. So when you come back to the present, you achieve a kind of release, a rest. And we had Organ Chögyam speak. He's a Tibetan teacher who speaks on Dzogchen, and he spoke at the Westchester Buddhist Center a couple of years ago. And he said, it's like having a really good nap, really good nap. And there are plenty of people whom I know personally, and you do too, who use shamatha meditation, coming back into awareness of an object in the present, as a way of dealing with stress. That's what Jon Kabat-Zinn is all about, and mindfulness stress reduction. Coming back to the present, you relieve yourself from the stress of the dreams. And so it's very important to create an environment that allows you to do that. And you create a special situation in your home, hopefully. It makes it easier. A place where you can do this, and maybe even a time that you regularly practice. Anything you can do to routinize it, because we are so apt to go off into the dreams. Oh, I got to have another cup of coffee. Oh, I forgot to call somebody. Oh, I should check my email. And before you know it, meditation has passed. It's not an opportunity anymore. So anything you can do to routinize it, create the proper environment for it, both temporally and physically, makes it easier to come back from those dreams. And in fact, the hardest part of meditation is just getting yourself to start it, because we get so caught up in the dreams of our heads. Oh, I have to do this. I have to call that person. What's that recipe? I forgot. Oh, somebody's mad at me. I better address that. Check my email, have a cup of coffee, have a cigarette, whatever it might be. Cigarettes aren't so big anymore. Used to be. So then there are these 7 characteristics. Passionlessness is the first. Now, all of these revolve around one central problem, which is the problem of I. We have this idea that there is this I who is ongoing, has problems, has possibilities, and we want to cultivate, nurture, and feed this I. This I lives in our dreams. That's the only place. As soon as we come back fully present into awareness right here and now, it dissolves. There's no need for it because we're awake. But I is the hero or the heroine of all those dreams. Oh, I'm a terrible person. Gosh, what I said to that person the other day, I should be punished. I'll never achieve enlightenment. Oh, I'm a great person. Look what I just done. Everybody admires me, blah, blah, blah. I, constantly. And I, in order to maintain itself, needs to keep dreams going. And what these dreams are forms, you could call them, this is what Trungpa Rinpoche used to call them, entertainment. The purpose of entertainment is to keep I alive. It gives it a function. It's the hero or the heroine of this entertainment, this drama, this script that was written for Netflix or Amazon Prime, and it's full of storm and thunder, Sturm und Drang in German, they call it. And it's all about the perils of I. Or if you remember, I'm too young for that, but the perils of Pauline that used to tour the United States back in the 1800s, and there were melodramas, and Pauline would be left lying tied to the railroad tracks with the train coming, and would the hero arrive in time to save her? Next episode, you'll find out. And that's the way we live our lives, in these constant melodramas. So passionlessness is the first characteristic of cultivating virtue, becoming a Dharmic person. He says, in the West, you are always looking for ways to solve your boredom problem. I mean, now what do we have? We've got Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu and everything else, and other things. In contrast, passionlessness means experiencing boredom properly and fully. That's what it is, that we can sit and we can let that constant need for entertainment go. Even fear is a form of entertainment for ego. I remember somebody asked him once, what is the purpose of fear? And he said, the purpose of fear is to prove that I exist. Because if you're afraid of that, there's this thing here that's afraid, I. It's the constant game of keeping ego alive. And ego is a myth, a lie. So number 2, contentment. You are contained in your own existence. He says, when you are constantly changing from one thing to another, looking for one form of entertainment, another thing to prove that I is alive and well, even unpleasant, painful things have that function of proving that I is there. And when you are constantly changing from one thing to another, you cannot celebrate your own life because we're always lost in a dream. The simplicity of practice or the simplicity of life. You don't have to chase away boredom with entertainments, he says. So that's the second characteristic, contentment, which is that you can rest without entertainment. That's a quality to be nurtured. And he says here, contentment is unconditional. It has no qualities. It has no needs. It's just this. We're right here, open, spacious, awake. The third is fewer activities. It's the same thing again. You're on reducing unnecessary, non-functional talking and entertainment mentality. That's what he says. Instead of holding to your discipline and mindfulness, you are giving up frivolous activities, keeping busy. You're giving up those things which keep you from your discipline and mindfulness. Number 4 is good conduct. And really this is connected with the 2 vows that some of you have taken, the Refuge Vow and the Bodhisattva Vow. And good conduct means that you begin to make friends with yourself. Wishing things were otherwise, which is ego's job, is very, very unfriendly to yourself. It has the feeling that I'm not good enough. If you think that things need to be improved, made better in one way or another, that means they're not good enough now. And that can be you, it can be your situation, it can be the whole world. So we take the Refuge Vow, and among other things, really what the essence of the Refuge Vow is, when you take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and the Sangha, is that you are beginning to make friends with yourself. And that means that you can see yourself accurately, everything, all the so-called negativities. You do something really terrible and you're ashamed of it and you wish that you think that it were different. And then you can begin to say, no, I'm not going to do that. And you come back to the awareness of it. And when you come back to the awareness of that thing, then you have an option. Then you have an option in terms of how you're going to deal with yourself in that situation. But until then, there's just regret, self-punishment, and self-hatred. So the essence of the Refuge Vow is beginning to make friends with yourself. Sometimes we call it having compassion for yourself. It's so necessary. The ultimate evil in Buddhism is self-attack, self-hatred. Not only do you harm yourself, but when you do that to yourself, you harm others because you inevitably either hold yourself back from full generosity and participation in others, with others, or you project it out. The same criticism you have for yourself, you project out on others. So self-hatred, self-criticism, self-doubt are the ultimate evils in Buddhism, although there are others. The second vow you take is the Bodhisattva vow. And that is the vow that you're going to dedicate your life to helping not only yourself, but especially others. And once you take that vow, it's for a long time. They say that taking the refuge vow is something you do for one lifetime. You take the refuge vow, the Bodhisattva vow, for multiple lifetimes. So for those of you who accept the idea of multiple lives, once you take the Bodhisattva vow, you're in it for quite a while. And the vow is, you see, it really, one only takes the Bodhisattva vow when one begins to realize that the only thing to do in this life is to be of benefit to others. It's what will make you happy, and really it's the only thing that makes sense. Pursuing one's own self-benefit is just ego's dream, constantly. And it's a lie, it's false. And he says that good conduct, this being compassionate to yourself and others, is based on mindfulness awareness, in which you see whatever you are doing as an extension of your sitting practice. Awareness is not self-consciousness. It is simply looking at what you are doing, being aware of what you are doing. It's so simple. There's no judgment in it. There's no imperative of having to do something, although you can. But the first step is just to come aware of what's going on in your own mind. When you are aware, you appreciate your whole existence and the world around you. There is tremendous sense that for the first time, you have become a real human being, because we're not living so much in the dream anymore. We begin to come present. It is waking up. It is the opposite of falling asleep. He says, I'm reading from some quotes from him, which is unpleasant, like putting your head in the sand, falling asleep. He said, it is possible to celebrate. You could be so sharp. You could be so smart. You can look at yourself and smile. All of this has to do with overcoming self-doubt and self-criticism. Then number 5 is awareness of the teacher. And the teacher is whoever, inspires you, really deeply. Doesn't have to be a human being, although you would like it to be. You would like to find somebody because it's much more powerful. And he said you could emulate the teacher properly and fully. It was easy for him to say, because I felt like I wished I could emulate him. You appreciate that you too are part of the same tradition and discipline. And it will affect your state of mind, including your subconscious gossip. And he said, I remember he said to me once, he said, at some point in your path, you'll realize that all your thoughts have become thoughts about the Dharma. Well, I don't know if that's ever happened, but it does definitely happen as you proceed further on the path and meditate more and study more, that your thoughts increasingly become thoughts about the teachings. Number 6, propagating prajna. You take pride in the Dharma. Whatever you do, you remain in the context of Dharma, and you understand that your life is soaked in Dharma. You're not taking time off from anything. Your life is infested with Dharma. And increasingly, you remember to come back. That's the whole point, that by meditating more, by studying more, you train yourself to come back into the present moment, out of these dreams. Number 7 is the attitude of goodness. You realize and appreciate basic goodness. Original sin is a myth. In fact, what he said was self-doubt is the Buddhist version of original sin. We're not fundamentally born evil at all. In fact, we're fundamentally born Buddha, awake. It's just that we've covered it over with this whole ego game of self-doubt. That's what ego is all about. We think of, when we hear the word ego, we think of being somebody being puffed up. But that's just one sort of twisted version. Really what ego is about fundamentally is self-doubt. And when you doubt yourself, then you puff yourself up in order to try to overcome that self-doubt. That's what pride and arrogance are. They're just indicators of self-doubt, self-hatred. And you begin to recognize basic goodness in everybody. What basic goodness is really the appreciation for this world as it arises right now in the present moment for no reason at all. That this world and oneself are fundamentally worth being here for. And that the more one begins to come back to awareness, the more that begins to become evident. That this world as it arises so beautifully, so vividly, so meaningfully for each one of us, with such opportunity to engage in acts of intelligence and kindness. And he says, the sense of goodness comes from your own shamatha practice and from the post-meditation discipline of considering properly. That's what the post-meditation discipline means, that you remember to come back, just as you do during your sitting practice. And finally, the end is remembering to be dharmic. This is Trungpa Rinpoche's extra step. It means that the Dharma is no longer regarded as a separate entity, but as part of your being, your basic existence. This is not something we're trying to graft into us. We're discovering it already in us. So it's part of us. And the more we begin to see that, we acknowledge it, we live it. And it's based on both meditation and post-meditation practice. What happens is the more you sit, the more you begin to remember to come back during your daily life. This is really the heart of this class. But we also had the next chapter, which is kind of fun, and I'll go over it, and then we can discuss both chapters if you wish. It'll be fast. This is the second chapter. It's called Refraining from Harm, and it's really about the rules of conduct. And he makes the point that for the monks and the nuns, there are hundreds of these rules, and that they developed over the course of time with the Buddha realizing that, in order to cultivate mindfulness, that these rules were useful and helpful. If you go to a meditation, group meditation practice, like what we call datan, that means a month-long practice, or even a weektan, which is a week-long practice. And of course, we don't have them now because of COVID, but we used to do them all the time, group practices. And we go off to some place like the Rocky Mountain Dharma Center in Colorado or Garrison Institute in New York, and all different kinds of places. And we sit as a group. And every morning, one of the things you do in the morning chants is you take the precepts, and there are 5. And these are what are being discussed in this chapter. And the precepts are not to kill, not to steal, not to lie, not to have improper sex, whatever that is anymore, and not to drink alcohol. And really the idea is that, if you kill, you steal, you lie, you're committing acts of harm. Sexual misconduct can also be an act of harm, and really that's the way it's meant. And the problem with alcohol is that the joke is you can abstain from the other 4, but if you drink, you'll wind up committing all the other 4. You get drunk and go and kill, steal, lie, and behave sexually improperly. So the basic idea is that alcohol loosens you up too much, and you will lose control and do things that you shouldn't. Now, just a couple of words about this. When you take these precepts, they are above all I mean, most of us aren't murderers. Most of us haven't even killed animals, although some of us may have. But how many people here have swatted a fly, killed a mosquito? We do these things without thinking, and we are taking the life of a sentient being, and we're being exhorted not to do that. Now, the first thing about that is that we become aware of what we're doing. It breeds awareness. And so it's important to take, when you take that vow, that you notice what's going on in your mind as you swipe that insect or kill that ant, whatever it may be. So it's an awareness practice. The same thing with stealing. I remember when you go to a group practice, and some of you will recognize this in your own homes, and we get up in the morning and you go into the shower to have a shower, and suddenly you realize, gosh, I forgot my soap. Well, stealing is, the definition of stealing is to take or use what is not offered. So here I've forgotten my soap. I'm in the shower. I've taken off my clothes, and somebody left their soap in the shower. I think, okay, I'm going to use that person's soap. That's breaking that vow. And the whole point is to be awake, to be aware, to realize what you're doing. When you are in a group situation like this and you break the vow, the injunction is, or the rule is, you have to go confess it to your meditation teacher, whoever that may be. The meditation teacher could care less, unless you actually murdered somebody or stole money out of their wallet or something. But, you have to go confess it, make it public. The third one is to refrain from lying. How many times have you told white lies to somebody? You didn't want to hurt their feelings, so you said something that was a lie, not true. Or you said something that was conveniently true, but not true. And this is to make yourself aware. It's amazing how often we do this. When you take the vow, you begin to notice. Until you take the vow, you don't. And by the way, when you take these vows, if we were to do this, they last for 24 hours. And then they have to be renewed or not. And also, when you take these vows, this is the rule, if you're planning on breaking one of them, you just don't take it. So we'd sit there in the morning, and if we were going to have alcohol, we were going to have a party, maybe it was the mid-Datun, mid-month break, and people knew they were going to go have a beer or something like that. Then when we would get to that vow, all of a sudden the room would go silent because nobody was going to take the vow not to drink. Or maybe they were going to see their partner and they would not take the vow not to have sex. And then finally, refraining from intoxicants, and I've already gone over the reason why that's used. It's that if you get drunk, you're going to break the other vows. So this is something that I haven't done it in a while. These things, it's kind of fun. When you're at a group retreat, you assume a posture, if you can, if you're physically able, on one knee with the other knee raised and your hands in anjali, and you say these chants that you've got in your book. The first one goes, Pranatipata Virati Shikshapadam Samadhiyami, which means I take refuge. I will refrain from killing, excuse me. And then you sort of chant them. You go through each one and you leave out the ones you're not going to do. But basically, they have this virtue of making you much more aware of stealing, like taking what isn't offered, like somebody left something in the kitchen on the counter and you go and you say, oh, that looks yummy, and you eat it. Or you kill some harmless sentient being or irritating sentient being without thinking much about it because they're a lower form of life. Or you get drunk and do things you didn't mean to do, and so forth. And it makes us more aware. So that's the purpose of these refraining from harm. It has the double virtue that actually we do less harm, killing, stealing, so forth, and also that we become much more aware. So we could have a discussion about this. Barry, maybe you'd help me find people who've got something to say.
I've got something to say.
I'm prepared.
And I think this might be going into the weeds a little bit of doing no harm. And I think you answered it in just it's about being aware. But, we, especially in the West, in our privileged lives, we are fortunate enough to live this life that we don't have to go out and kill things and to survive and protect ourselves and whatnot. But we are just in our daily life, we're creating harm, through our lifestyles. There's we may not be creating the harm ourselves, but we are buying products and whatnot that are harming the earth or harming other people or harming animals. And how do we contend with that other than just saying I'm aware of it and I am going to buy this product or eat this meal or whatnot?
I think it's very individual, up to you with your awareness and how you want to deal with it. And in each situation, it's different too. I mean, some things are much more flagrantly harmful than others, right? Yeah. When I first met Trungpa Rinpoche, I was vegetarian. And that didn't last long. he was eating meat. But the reason it didn't last long was because we were trying to be virtuous. Those of us who were vegetarian, those of us who were back in this is 1970, and plenty of food trips. I mean, here in Boulder, they had the Green Mountain Granary, it was all macrobiotic and organic food, and everybody was on food trips, and it's a kind of neurosis as well if you try to make yourself too virtuous. And I remember him giving a seminar. It was up in on the Peak to Peak Highway, and we were out in sort of this. It was a camp, and they had a big roof with open sides and dirt floor, and he was sitting on a short, a low stage about 4 feet high, and a person stood up in the Q&A, and we were all, so many people were hippies. This is 1971. And this guy's, he's bare chested and he's got long hair, and he says to him, and Rinpoche was sitting there smoking cigarettes and drinking scotch. And the guy says, your body is your temple. You're defiling the temple, the guy says. And this is exactly the kind of thing Rinpoche was combating, this thing of going off on these trips of trying to organize our lives according to some idea of virtue that we would then make ourselves holy. So Rinpoche's sitting there, and there's a dog walking across in the dirt across the front of the stage, and he leans over like this, and he starts going, woof, woof, barking at the dog. And then he leans back and he looks at this guy and he says, the whole world is my body. Yeah. So it's really a matter of us doing the right thing with compassion, with intelligence, and not with self-aggrandizement, because that kind of virtue of refraining from some conceptual rules about evil can be a form of self-aggrandizement. Piety, now I'm going to be a holy person. And that's what he really hated, and that's such a thick level to cut through initially. But once we cut through it, and many people here, that's not a problem, then we can begin to live our lives with intelligence in terms of how we want to be of benefit in this world, I think. Does that make any sense? Does that address what you said?
Yeah, it really does. It's especially that idea of the piety of living a life that raises you above others in this case, and the whole idea that it's it's an individual choice of what I choose to engage in and what I don't, and it's for me to come to peace with and make those choices. Yeah, that's very helpful.
And to live your life with clarity and open-heartedness, what he called a sad and tender heart. That's so powerful, so meaningful. I mean, when you create art, you can create art out of that kind of inspiration, the clarity and the sad and tender heart. And it's beautiful. So.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Danielle, I think, has something.
Hi. I understand, I think, what you're saying. I'm just wondering about judgment. Like if somebody did get drunk and they hadn't taken the vow, does that mean there is a judgment, or it's just life, or, or you, I don't know, do something like kill something and you didn't take the vow, so it still doesn't make it okay, but like, does that mean like, is there any value judgments to it, in Buddhism?
There's no value. I mean, on the one hand, let me put it this way. There are three main levels of the Buddhist teachings, okay? The first level is the Hinayana. We're going to get to the Mahayana pretty soon. We're going to finish this book. And we're going to go to the second volume of the Profound Treasury of the Ocean of Dharma. It's about the Mahayana, which is the second level. And then beyond that, we'll see about the Vajrayana. It gets pretty interesting. Each level has its attitude toward this. And at the Hinayana level, you take the vows because basically we're not very awake yet. We're sort of still operating on automatic a lot. We get caught up in our habitual patterns, our dreams. Somebody says something to us that ticks us off and we just lose it, and go get angry, lose control. And then we think, oh God, what did I just do? I lost my mindfulness. I was terrible. I was, blah, blah, blah. At that level, the Hinayana level, we take these vows. Just lost you, Daniel. Got buried instead. We take these vows because even though they're crude, even though they don't necessarily involve a lot of insight and awareness, nonetheless, they keep us from doing harm. And there are times when, the vow not to kill might be utterly inappropriate. A snake's about to bite your friend. You want to kill it, something like that. Or, the person's about to be stung by a hornet. You want to stop that from happening, and you might damage the hornet. So there are situations, but with the idea, that's why these vows are both crude, and not necessarily always accurate, but they're helpful. They can keep us out of trouble. Now,
Like baby steps.
Huh?
Like baby steps.
Exactly. We use them as baby steps. At the Mahayana level, you begin to see with much more insight, and you begin to act accurately, properly, out of insight and open-heartedness, compassion and clarity, rather than out of adherence to the vows, although the vows are still there. At the Vajrayana level, to act out of adherence to a vow like this, a vow not to kill, steal, those kinds of vows, is regarded as a crime. It's a betrayal of the insight, the Buddha mind, the Buddha nature. How's that? Isn't that interesting? They say it's a breach of samaya. Samaya is the vow that you take, bond that you take to bind yourself to open-hearted reality. There are many samaya vows, but that's basically the essence of samaya. And when they say that when you adhere to one of these lower level vows, like all the hundreds that monks and nuns take, and you're a Vajrayana practitioner, if you're a real Vajrayana, if you have that insight of the Vajrayana, then you are breaking Samaya. Now, you can be a Vajrayana practitioner without having developed that insight. You can start practicing Vajrayana practices very early on, but you're doing it with the mind of a Hinayana practitioner, or at best, maybe a Mahayana practitioner. Does that help?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Baby steps.
John.
Meg.
Hi.
Hi. Oh, it's not Meg. I'm sorry. Who is?
Oh, John, this is Christy. Hi. I have a question that just goes with what Danielle was saying, and I'm just curious about, so like that crudeness of taking the vows creates this sort of, when you were, let's say you kill something, there's like this energy that's created. I wonder about judgment, like being something like really primal or something, to like the psyche of where we're at, that it just causes such like waves in us that you know, we're like, I don't know if like another kind of animal would have like the same reaction to like just playing with vow. I mean, it's like a very human thing, that like taking a vow would just create awareness, and that there's judgment is just a part of who we are at such a deep level that it just creates I'm just curious about that. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but as I'm curious about I know in my own experience, I've felt that when you are like, I want to try to do better in this way, and then you fail yourself, or you don't, do that. And the waves that it creates, like psychologically, or just, I wonder if that's why just these crude, I'm just wondering why, I guess, taking these crude vows does that, or can have this ability to like crack us out of, or be aware of like the way we judge ourselves, or
If
something.
you use the vows to create some kind of idea of piety, of virtue, we're misusing them. If you feel self-critical, of yourself, if you feel like you need to improve, then you aren't liking what you are. And that in itself is a problem. That's what needs to be let go. That self-dislike. And that's so really what it's a very commonsensical kind of thing. We use these vows, number one, to help us not do harm. Number two, though, to help us become more aware. Because we realize that we broke the vow unconsciously. We swiped that insect and we didn't even realize we were doing it. We used that bar of soap in the shower, and then we realized, that it wasn't offered, and we had vowed not to take something that wasn't offered. Whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. So they're both mindfulness practices, but they're also, and maybe to a lesser extent, I'm not even sure if that's true, ways of avoiding being a harmful person. Ultimately, the idea is that you become so awake, you wake up so much, you're here in this present moment, this space. We are shift. This is the whole purpose of the path, is to shift our loyalty from the dreams of thought, which are always about I, ego, self-centeredness, to shift our loyalty from that constant recording that's going on. It's like, I call it the AM radio effect, in your mind, to awake awareness right now. Right now, you're completely right here with me. You're seeing me, and it's effortless. That awakeness is what we are shifting our loyalty to. We don't trust it initially. We think, oh, I've got to be careful. And then we go back into thought. But the more you practice, the more you begin to realize you don't need thought. that your intelligence is right here in this open space of this present moment now. And this is the only reality we ever have. All the rest of it is dream. And so the more we begin to switch our loyalty to that, the more genuine our adherence to these rules becomes. The less egotistical, the less self-punishing.
Thank you.
Sitting practice and carrying that practice out into daily life, which is harder, those are the keys. Study is great. It helps, definitely. But sitting practice is the gold standard. Who's next? Somebody. There's so many terrific people here in this room. I wish you would speak up.
Well, Judy and Steph.
Either one.
John, on page 161, there down at the bottom, they say he says, if you study hard enough, when you have subconscious gossip during your shamatha practice, the chances are that your subconscious gossip will be dharmic. Instead of reruns of past memories, such as hitting your grandmother on the head.
I know. Yeah. How about the one about cutting off your toes? I mean, you know, that was him.
But actually, subconscious gossip that is dharmic. Can you give me an example of that?
Yeah, you are thinking about how unaware you are, how you just you know, were rude to this person, and it was completely out of your habitual patterns, you know, that just propelled you into that rudeness. And it could be that, or it could be, oh, this world is so beautiful. You know, I'm seeing the brilliance of the sun and the color of the trees, and it's just flooding in, and you're appreciating that. That's all of that's Dharma. Waking up, almost anything, coming out of dream into awakening of what's going on. And there are two aspects to what is to awakening. There's awakening to what is going on inside you, your cognizance, your awareness.
Yeah.
There's awakening to what's going on outside. They call this cognizance and appearance. Appearances are the sights, sounds, you know, smells, tastes, and bodily sensations. And that's the waking up to that. That's dharmic.
Why
You begin to have thoughts about
do
it.
we call that gossip?
Because it's still, you're thinking to yourself and thinking, gee, you know, maybe I ought to go meditate or, you know, that'll get me somewhere. Maybe I'll become a more dharmic person. Maybe I'll become a Buddha. Maybe people will admire me. You know, you can have all these kinds of thoughts like that around the Dharma. It's endless. And then you say, whoops, I'm thinking again. And that's what the beauty of sitting. Because when you're sitting and you have those kinds of thoughts, inevitably you say, oh, I'm doing it again. And you let them go. Come back to real awareness.
Oh, okay.
But their virtue is that they bring you back.
It's dharmic kind of thinking.
It brings you back to this present moment. That is the ultimate dharmic thinking. It's like a self-destruct thought because it brings you back into no thought, into pure awareness, ultimately.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Steph and Fred both had something, I think.
Yeah, but I was listening, so I have to remember what I was going to say. The Hinayana path, I am beginning to see is a beginner path. And what I've seen of it is it seems to be very forgiving. And like even the vows, you just take them for a day at a time, one day at a time. This is a familiar mantra that has been shown to be effective. But there's a lot of stuff to think about and to not think about. And so I'm wondering, could intention be a guide here as to whether you're moving in the right direction? Like sometimes you break those covenants, right? You kill the snake that's going to bite your friend. But if your intention was to do good, then would that be a guide to whether the action was dharmic, I guess?
Well said. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, he talks about it, and there are three aspects to, the vow. There's the intention, there's the action, and there's the fruition. They all have to be evil for it to be broken. But if your intention is to do good, to save your friend from being bitten by a snake, you haven't broken a vow. But so, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's wonderful. Yeah, intention is so important. Well, what are we intending to do as we sit down on our cushion to meditate? What is our intention? If our intention is to go off and fantasize for an hour, that's no good. But if our intention is to wake up, to be a better meditator, more awake.
So seeking awakeness, that wouldn't be considered, what was the word? Like, I forgot the word you used, like a religious zealot going after something.
Yeah.
Seeking awakeness is not like seeking power or seeking, I want to do this so that I want to be the best meditator in the room. Like, that's not the way to go about it, but sitting to meditate, to find where you go, that's an appropriate intention.
You could pervert it, but it's hard to do in this context because we're emphasizing boredom. And boredom is the fail-safe. It's what keeps us straight.
Yes, when the first time you said that, it really rang that boredom is when you're at home and there's nothing else going on. And that really hit me.
We're not entertaining ourselves with dreams of glory.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great discussion. Great question.
So Fred.
Well, I've got an observation on the importance of what they call this, fewer activities. Especially as with the Hinayana path to the Mahayana path. I remember I first got into spirituality. I wanted to. You went off? All right, bud. All right, go let him. I wanted to do good and help people, and then I tried to do too much, and I wasn't helping anybody. And especially now, I see so many people. There's this promotion within the culture for activism and to go out and protest, and some of the protests turn violent, and I feel my heartbreak. It's like, how do I help? And I just don't know what to do. And I'm like, maybe nothing's the answer.
I'm not sure what the question is here.
Yeah, I don't either. It's just an observation. I think like how important it is, of doing nothing. Like the Buddha, he was in these two extremes and he just did nothing. He's like, be a king or.
If the intention is to be of service, to help others, it's hard to go wrong. They say in the teachings that there are 3 levels of helping others. The first level, and they're all worthy, all worthy. The first level is helping people with food and shelter, their basic needs, what they need to survive. The second level is helping people to be free from fear. And the third level is helping people to undo and wake up from confusion, which has to do with ego, so that they can be awake, open-hearted, compassionate. Fred, your camera's going crazy.
Yeah, my son grabbed my grabbed my phone and tried to run away with it, but I caught him.
So I think that really what we do is we practice our meditation, we try to wake up, we're switching our allegiance from ego's constant desire for entertainment to awakening, to being awake in the moment and open-hearted and compassionate. And if your activities help with that, like you're being of service to others, that's marvelous. If you're inspired to, but not out of piety, not out of trying to be a, goody two-shoes. That way lies further complication.
Yeah, I guess that's where we kind of need to do less to uproot that piety and virtue and spiritual materialism, right? That's okay. Gotcha. Thank you. That was very helpful.
Great.
Tony,
I feel like I remember you talking about like the desire to do good and be better is what brings us to the path in the first place. It's what gets us to sit and deal, to undo that. Like those things are necessary to like you have to have the desire in the first place in order to undo the desire.
Is this a question or are you a statement?
No. It's comments. It's something I just remember you talking about. Like it's the the dichotomy of it, the complexity of your intention of, what brings us to the path in the first place. And
What brings us fundamentally is the desire to be free from our unhappiness. And that's why we come to the path. That's the first teaching the Buddha gave. The Four Noble Truths. After his enlightenment, he met some yogis and they asked him, they saw that he'd changed and they asked him for teachings. And he taught the Four Noble Truths. And the first of them is the truth of suffering. And what suffering is fundamentally wishing that things were different, that were otherwise. And that's what brings us, the Hinayana path, the first stage of the path, is all about dealing with that. It's about achieving freedom from suffering, and which means freedom from ego, because ego is all about suffering. That's what I is. I is a constant sufferer. I constantly feels it's not good enough. I got to make it better. I'm not good enough. I got to make me better. My world isn't good enough. I got to make it better. And it's this constant suffering. And maybe things do need to be changed or improved, but the dream of that is the suffering. And really, according to Buddhism anyhow, that's what brings people to the path, is that desire to be free from suffering, dukkha in Sanskrit, they call it. You just invoked Sanskrit. So, and then, then when you begin to realize that you can cultivate kindness and clarity as well, that becomes motivation too. But I think that comes a bit further down the path as you begin to meditate and come out of the dreams, begin to shift your loyalty from dreams to awake. The Hinayana path is, sometimes people think it's primitive or beginner. It's not. It's profound, goes a long, long way. And in fact, Trungpa Rinpoche called it the foundational path. You don't never leave it. It just becomes the foundation for what comes after and becomes a part of it. So like mindfulness, which is the first thing you learn on the Hinayana path, mindfulness practice, coming back to awareness of something in the present moment. It's a principle that goes all the way through to the Vajrayana. It's essential. Well, friends, any more questions or comments? Are you finished, Tony?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll make a comment here as you spoke of that the Hinayana as the foundation. It's just a conversation I was just having with my engineer as I've been building this project, and the foundation, it's not the glorious part, but if that fails, everything above fails. And and he put it into money standards. If your foundation fails, you're talking about 6-digit repairs. Anything above that, you're in the 5 digits or the 4 digits. But just on that physical level, the importance of the foundation, and it always has to be there. So just a comment.
That's good. A build construction. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank Kurt for saying that, because when I was reading it, it's like, life imitating art. It's like I'm reading about the Hinayana path being the foundation, but as I'm reading it, it's like I'm going, no, I want to go straight to realizing emptiness. I want the sexy stuff, right? I don't want to deal with the Hinayana path. I mean, I do, but I want to say that I have, right? I just want us to go right to realizing shunyata or tantra, or whatever it is. It's just so, but that's the boredom problem too, right? The boredom problem, it's seems more entertaining to me, right? It's
I think the more you understand it and practice the Hinayana, the more you appreciate it, and begin to realize that it's really wonderful. And we could be so thankful for those teachings, because they bring us into sanity and love of life. Yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you. But I know exactly what you're talking about. Everybody wants to, we all want it. We want to go to the exotic, the advanced, tantra.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I just found that very calming as you said that. So,
and people associate tantra with sex a lot. Like, I still get that. I just got it the other day. It's amazing. And it comes from mostly the Hindu tradition, although there are sexual practices in Buddhist tantra as well. But when I first moved to Boulder in 1970 with Trungpa Rinpoche, there was a housing development that they had just built, somebody just built, and they named it Tantra Estates. They figured people would come and buy places because they would think, oh, we're going to have a wild sexual time here. The word Tantra literally means continuity. And what it's referring to is the continuity of awareness, which is the same thing as the space that we inhabit. It never ends. It has no beginning. It has no end. They call it primordial, causeless. And that's what Tantra really refers to. Well, friends, maybe we should end. I would appreciate it or like it or invite you to chant the dedication of merit. We're dedicating this. We're in the spirit of the Mahayana and the Vajrayana Tantra. We're dedicating the merit that's generated here for the benefit of all sentient beings, including us. And here it is. Some night I'm going to explain what the Rigdons are. You all deserve to know.
Yes.
Okay. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you all. And don't take the vow not to drink if you're on New Year's.
Thank you, John.
Unless you really want to.
Thank you.
Great advice.
Thank you, John, so much.
John.
Thank you, John. Everybody.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Healthy New Year,
Thank
everyone.
you.
See you, John.
Happy New Year.
Good to
Thanks,
see you.
everyone.
Happy New
So
Year.
long, folks.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New
See you next week.
Hasta mañana.
Mañana.
Hinayana.
Okay.
Bye.
Great to see you, Judy,
You too.
and everybody else. George, nice to see you again. Okay, I'm going to close the meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Tony. Bye, Peter.